languages. Normally I speak only in one language. Yeah. Having been a professional environmental engineer, I've always relied much more on manual instruments as compared to automatic instruments. Because I find in this country, and for that matter of fact, even in South Asia and Southeast Asia, they're far more reliable. I was just telling your chairman of the board that I have used passive samplers very effectively in 8 countries when I was working with UNAP. And I found that the data was far more reliable than the automatic stations we have in this country. And I've always wondered why we use these automatic stations, because basics of information theory tells you that actually you use online information when you can take online action. Now, where in this country can we do online action? Nowhere. I've asked previous member secretaries and chairman of the Central Pollution Control Board, and they've never been able to answer this question. Actually, Rohit and I traded places. Normally, I speak on pollution-related problems because that's what I work professionally as. And I'm not really a water expert. Yet, 3 years back, I was in Bangalore when they raised this slogan, Nama Kaveri. Nama Kaveri in Kannada means my Kaveri. And for some time before that, I was talking of the issue of we should not talk about resources as personal properties, but as basically we should talk in terms of usufruct rights. That's when I did a little bit of work on the Kaveri and many other river systems. And when I was asked by FAMA to speak, I asked them what topic. They said water, so I converted that paper that I wrote into a talk. I'm sorry you're going to miss some nice slides, but well, that's how life is. Okay, so I'm going to just speak off the cuff. First of all, since there's already been a eulogy for Dr. Abhee Dutt-Mazumder, I'm not going to say very much, except that I missed the opportunity of knowing him the way I knew, for example, Meher engineer in the city. I've known him for more than 10 years. We invited him to Hyderabad, and I even met him last December. And I told him, you're looking very wan, you've lost weight. He said, yes, but he never told me what his problem is. Physicists, I find, a very interesting breed, because they often turn to either music of some sort to keep them away from some of the large issues that they deal with, or they turn to activism of the sort that Meher engineer did, or Abhee Dutt-Mazumder did. And I believe Abhee Dutt-Mazumder, I went through some of his papers. I'm not a physicist, but there's a little bit here and there that I understand because my son is a physicist and we often have a lot of discussions. I found that the range of subjects that he dealt with was just amazing. And 61 papers by the time he was 45. I have been in the academic world for some time. That is quite an achievement. So we lost a great soul. In more terms than one, a person who was not only a good physicist, but a person, because that subject, I've come across many more oddities amongst physicists that they begin to question. And they realize how small we are in the universe. And that is when they get into subjects like philosophy and so on and so forth. I've had some wonderful discussions with physicists of all the people on a wide range of subjects, from mathematics to philosophy to what have you. And that includes Meher engineer. Okay, so topic that I'm going to talk on today is on water wars. Not really my subject, but you see, I got into it more because I was looking at this whole problem of where does the whole question of ownership rights come from. But I'll come to that a little later. Let me tell you a little bit about water wars and water conflicts. Okay, I'm sorry, I've come to Calcutta with a bad throat and some fever, so you'll have to forgive me. You'll have to forgive me a bit if I'm a little slow at times. There are 2 types of water conflicts, and I'm going to touch upon both of them. One is when humans conflict with humans, because each side wants to have little more of the cake, little more of the water. The other is when humans conflict with nature itself. And we don't talk so much about that. But I'm going to talk about both, and I'm going to, in a sense, personalize some of these issues. I'm going to talk about Dr. G.K. Agarwal, in a way my guru, and I'm going to talk about a few others who fought water wars. Okay, let me start with a small story. So, Surapadma was an asura. You know who an asura is. This guy was in South India, and Indra was one day walking through his land, and he got quite annoyed. So he sent Varuna to catch hold of Indra. But Indra gave him the slip. This is how the mythology story goes as to how Kaveri started. And in his wrath, what Varuna did was he used scorch earth tactics. He, made the whole land absolutely dry, no rains, whatever. And one day, Agastya Muni was passing by, and he decided that this is really bad. So what do Munis do? They do only one thing. They pray and pray and pray. Or sometimes they curse people. So this guy prayed, and then he asked Shiva for a boon, and Shiva gave him a kamandalam, saying that, you sprinkle this water wherever you want, and a huge mighty river will come, but that water is meant for all living things, including non-living things as well. Okay, so Agastya Muni procrastinated. He didn't find the right place to sprinkle this water. So Ganesha got quite annoyed with the whole thing, came in the form of a crow, and he toppled the Kamandalam one fine day, and that is where Kaveri started. Mind you, the underlying thing that Shiva said is this water is meant for all, living and non-living things. And that is precisely what we have violated. Our own mythology tells us these things, and we violated these things. So let me start with the Kaveri story. Kaveri is one of the three main rivers in South India. As you know, it starts somewhere in the Western Ghats near Kodagu. And basically, it flows largely through Karnataka, and at the end it goes into Tamil Nadu. Now, it's a fact that the delta farmers are the first farmers who use water anywhere in the world, for that matter. So the Tamil Nadu farmers started using the Kaveri water over 1,000 years back. And suddenly, about 200 years back, the farmers in the Mysore plateau realized that, come on, we can also use this water. But by then, the delta farmers were using quite a bit of water. So both Tamil Nadu and Karnataka started talking about this water being theirs. And they both went to the Supreme Court. And there were water agreements. Before going to the Supreme Court, there were various river water agreements and things of this sort that went on. And basically, the two arguments that were used are irreconcilable arguments. Both the arguments really come from US legal doctrines. So what does Karnataka say? It uses a US legal doctrine to say, since this water actually originates in my land, all the water is mine, and if at all I give you any water, it's by my grace. What does Tamil Nadu say? That, listen, I have been using this water for 1,000 years, so I have what is called first user's rights. Now you just take that a little forward and try to argue it out, logically, and it just won't work. Because each side is going to stick to its stand. And there are two problems that arise here. Either the amount of water goes down, which is likely to happen in the Kaveri. I've started, so thank you. I think they got a laptop, but I will interrupt the whole flow. So I hope you don't mind if I continue talking. Okay. So though there are some very good slides, so maybe at the end I will screen a few slides. But let me continue this way for the time being. Okay, so let's, in this case, they've gone to the Supreme Court, all this kind of stuff. And essentially Karnataka's argument is Nama Kaveri, my Kaveri. They own the water, that's what they say, okay? So actually when this, later I'll show you a slide, because I put out an interesting little cartoon. It's not a cartoon so much as a figure, when this Nama Kaveri thing came out, saying Nama Vayu. Interestingly, if you look at the upper air wind map of South Asia, for 8 months in the year, the winds come from Turkey. And they cross Iran, Iraq, and Afghanistan, Pakistan, and they follow the Ganga. And they take a nice big U-turn somewhere in the northeast and go over the Bay of Bengal and then hit the Eastern Ghats, Western Ghats, and they get stopped over the Maldives. There's a huge convection current there called the Intertropical Convergence Zone. That's where they stop. Okay, supposing I just said, I put this thing out on the net, saying Pakistan found some way of stopping the air by saying Namavayu. What would you do? Not that they have a device. What would you do? Well, it's a way of making people think. Okay. Now, what are the major problems with water? We have problems with water if there is too much, or there is too little, or the water is contaminated. Okay, and this is exactly what we have to deal with on both sides, both in Bangladesh as well as in Pakistan. In Bangladesh, there is, at some point by 2100, maybe I'll switch to slides because I do want you to see some of these slides, particularly on West Bengal, because by 2100, Calcutta is drowned. We use models to do these kinds of things, and I will show you some of these things at least towards the end, just a few slides towards the end, because these slides are very startling. So either we have too much water, there's a problem, like a cyclone or something of that sort, or we have too little water, there's drought, and things of the sort, or the water is contaminated. Now, just as a very small aside, I've dealt with this problem of hexavalent chromium, and I'm mortally scared of it. I dealt with it in Ghaziabad when Shriram Pistons did this, and the plant next door was making biscuits for Britannia, and they got green water out of 3 tubelets, and they didn't know what it was, they didn't know what to do. They went to the Pollution Control Board, and the Pollution Control Board said, we don't know what to do about it, go to a EIA. So Shriram Pistons got an EIA done, and they didn't tell us what the problem was until we were 3 months, 4 months down into the whole thing. And suddenly we discovered that there's a huge problem. I'm mortally scared. I won't tell you the rest of the story because it's a pretty long story, but these problems are very difficult to deal with, in fact. Technically also they're very difficult to deal with. And I'm mortally scared, particularly of hexavalent chromium, because next to uranium, it's the most carcinogenic substance you can come across. Now, having done all these things in the past, EIAs and all these kinds of things, I got out of it about 25 years back when it started getting corrupt, basically. Because I asked the same question that Prajapati asked. I asked this question almost 25, 30 years back when the Punjab Pollution Control Board chairman was there. That, we've been doing these EIAs now. Then it was very new for 5, 7 years. How come the environment has deteriorated perceptibly? And there was no answer. So much later, 10 years, more than 10 years, 12 years back, I was in a Government of India committee to make changes to the way environmental impact assessment is done and the way environmental clearances are to be given. And the first committee meeting, Mr. Rajamani and I resigned. Rajamani was the former Secretary of the Ministry of Environment. Why? Because we said that this is too important a subject to deal with in the 4 walls of some room in Delhi. We want to hold public hearings, which government will never say no to a committee. It does something very simple. It just doesn't give you any money to travel, to go, and so on. So that's how they, stop it. We resigned. We wrote our own memorandum, sent it to the PM. Of course, knowing that Manmohan Singh was not going to do anything about it. But we were hoping that people's organizations will take it up, and that also didn't happen. And we said 3 things, primarily in the report. First is we said, it is not the impacting party that should do the impact study, it's the impacted party. And that if it's a brownfield plant, that includes workers. 1, okay? Industry provides the money, or project proponent provides the money, but it should be done by the impacted party, that is bystander population plus workers. The second thing we said is shut down the pollution control boards. Without saying they're useless, we said they're useless. And believe me, several secretaries of the Ministry of Environment later agreed with us on this. Now the pollution control boards have passed their prime. They're not doing anything. We said hand over the responsibility of what is called consent management. That is, consent management is nothing but a license. License not to pollute, it's a license to pollute, actually. And interestingly, a person no less than the chairman of the Central Pollution Control Board pointed it out, that in fact the environmental law in India is counterproductive. That if you look at the cess law, the more water you take, the more money you get. So there is a sort of an incentive actually to draw, for the pollution control board to say, go draw more water. The same thing happens with pollution itself. So, so the second thing we said is get rid of the pollution control boards, hand over consent management to the panchayats and local governments, because basically with the local self-governments, you are very close to the scene of crime. Ultimately what happens in a village is everybody comes to know roughly what is happening in the panchayat office. So you can bribe a guy for some time, after some time it comes to be known, whereas this is not the case. In Hyderabad, the pollution control board, if something happens, nobody comes to know about it. Few people come to know about it. The second thing is that your own family is part of the population that is victim to the pollution. So your own family is going to turn against you at some point. The third thing we said is define what is acceptable impact. And we said set up these 5 standards. Anyone fails, it's unacceptable impact. The reason why we said this is because today, there is no definition for what is acceptable impact, and everything is acceptable, actually, finally. What is not told to you is that what industry or a project proponent wants is for you to pass. You can put any number of conditions. They know how to flout. I know it because I've been on inspections, okay, where you're supposed to do modeling and put your, let us say, air quality station somewhere here, they will go and put it here. On paper, the station is working. In practice, it's of no use at all. It doesn't give you information that is usable at all. So, what we tried to do, in a sense, was to hand over slowly part of the environmental management to people. Unfortunately, the people's movements didn't ever take it up, except in an odd case here and there. Okay, that's just an aside. Coming back to water. The case of the Jordan River is actually one of the most interesting. Jordan, I wish I could have put up the map, but okay. The Jordan River divides Israel on the left-hand side to the west of the Jordan River. It's a straight north-south river with a lake right on top. So you have Israel on the left-hand side, and you have Syria, and you have Jordan, the state, south of Syria. Now, actually a lot of the conflict between Israel, Syria and Jordan is because of the Jordan river water. Basically, Israel wanted to draw water from the lake right on top, and Syria and Jordan didn't want them to draw that water. So they decided to build a canal which is parallel to the river, and so that there's not enough water in the river. So what does Israel do? The next thing, cut a long story short, I won't tell you the whole story. It was there in the slides. What does Israel do next? It decides that the best way to deal with this problem is to use some excuse and invade Syria. And then they took over the Golan Heights, and they took over what is now Palestine. Okay? Now, prior to this, the US got involved in this whole problem, saying that this was an area of conflict. And they got involved, they sort of came to an agreement, but both sides finally decided that they did not want to implement this agreement at all. Because the Arabs didn't want to be seen signing an agreement with Israel, because that would be basically admitting that Israel is a legal entity. And Israel was afraid, because once it gave some water to Syria and Jordan, then it would lose control. What happens in all these things, but I'll come to that a bit later, is in the case of the Jordan River, it goes through all 3 stages of a water conflict, which is what I'll come to as I talk about the Nile and the other issues. Nile, longest river in the world, goes through something like 10 states, largely through Egypt, but you have Ethiopia and you have Sudan and so on. Now, prior to 1924, when Egypt got its independence, the British had control over all this land. And when Egypt got its independence, they came to an agreement with Egypt that no dam would be built in Ethiopia in the upper reaches of the Nile without Egypt giving its permission. So Egypt said, okay, we will have the final say whether it can be dammed in Ethiopia or Sudan or further north and so on. Now by World War II, the end of the Second World War, the other countries became independent and they all came up with their plans to build dams in Ethiopia or Sudan, X, Y, Z and so on. Each time a country came up with a plan, Egypt did something very simple. All it said is, our nation is being threatened, and it put out its Air Force planes out there flying on top, and without saying so, said, you build a dam, we'll bomb it into smithereens. That's what they said, basically. And none of the countries had the guts to build a dam. Whereas Egypt went right away and built its Aswan High Dam. So military strength works in all these things. Let's take the case of the Tigris-Euphrates. These are two parallel rivers flowing through the most ancient civilization that we've known, Mesopotamia. Both these rivers start in Turkey. One of them flows through Syria, which is the Euphrates, and the other Tigris. They flow almost parallel to each other, right through Iraq, and then finally meet 200 kilometers short of the sea, and then it flows into the sea. Now, here is a three-way conflict that's been going on. Turkey has been in conflict with Syria, Syria has been in conflict with Iraq, Iraq and Syria get together to contain Turkey and all this, but Turkey finally has the final word for two reasons. One is these rivers originate in Turkey, and Turkey militarily is more powerful than Syria or Iraq. So what happens is each time there is a problem in this region, Syria, what it does is it starts arming and aiding the Kurdish rebels in Turkey. And then there are agreements that Turkey and Syria make every now and then, saying, okay, if you stop helping the rebels, then we will give you some more water. This is how the whole problem has been dealt with out there. Okay, it's really not just a water problem, it's been a politicized water problem. So that's not the end of this whole thing out there, that finally Turkey has decided to start building dams in its own land. Now, can Syria and Iraq do something about it? Well, let's see if they can. History will tell us in due course of time. Now, let's come to our own neighborhood. The Indus Water Treaty. We have 6 rivers. The 3 eastern rivers, that is basically the Satluj, the Bias, and the Ravi. The waters of these 3 rivers are to go to India. I'm cutting a big story short. The waters of the Jhelum, the Chenab, and the Indus, they largely go to Pakistan. In terms of division of the waters in these 6 rivers, it's something like about 29% of the total water comes to India, and the balance 71% goes to Pakistan. Now, I was in Pakistan, in Islamabad, some years back, and after our official meetings, their Ministry of Environment fishes out a document and waves it and says, see this. I said, okay. What they said in the document, whatever the figures be, logically is absolutely correct from their point of view. They say that India has the glaciers which give them water, and that if India cuts even 5% of that water, then basically their malnutrition rates of the under 10-year-olds is going to, the incidence of the malnutrition will go up by 17%. Whether it's 17, 15, 13, it doesn't matter. The logic is absolutely correct. They say what we want is control over water. What they're trying to do is minimize their risk, actually. This is what they're doing, actually. So when you look at this whole problem of the Indus water treaty, each time there is a problem, like Pulwama or something, what does India say? Indirectly, not directly. It's never said directly. Yeah, we have other means, to tighten the screw on you. And one of those means is the Indus water treaty. India is losing property rights up there. The question is it right? So, where does the problem really arise in all this? One is when the political and the ecological boundaries don't match. And invariably they don't. We have more and more countries either splitting apart or joining up somewhere. So you have problems of water conflicts. Right within India, over the Tista River, over, between states, in fact, over the Tista River, of course, is Bangladesh. But within the states itself, the whole breakup of Telangana and Andhra, where I come from, basically, or where my forefathers came from, there were two major reasons why it happened. And one of that was the sharing of Godavari water. So basically, Telangana's stand was that, well, you got most of the Krishna water, so, and you're not giving us Godavari water, so we want a separate state. Okay. Invariably, the political and ecological boundaries don't match. And therefore, the only way to settle this whole thing is the way that Tamil Nadu and Karnataka farmers tried to solve this problem 15 years back. They said, to hell with the political parties. Let the farmers of Karnataka and the farmers of Tamil Nadu sit across and decide who wants how much, who needs how much. It failed. It failed because the political parties intervened. Every political party intervened and saw that a farmer-to-farmer dialogue failed. They didn't want that to happen. That was too dangerous because it meant people's control. Okay. So, the second problem that arises with water issues is contrary doctrines are used. Now, the doctrines that were used in the Karnataka-Tamil Nadu conflict, both are from the US and both are absolutely contrary. You cannot reconcile these two doctrines. One which says this water is mine, the other says I'm the first user. Finally, what happens? As time progresses, every state wants more water. And if every state wants more water and they don't come to an agreement, finally the whole problem gets militarized, as happened on the Jordan River, for that matter. And is very likely to happen in due course on the Indus River as well. So, what do we see? We see water conflicts going through basically three stages. In the first stage, there's enough water for everybody, so nobody really cares. There's not enough use of that water, there's enough water, so people say, okay, you take some, I will take some, and that's the end of the story. The second stage, where the water demand goes up on both sides of a border. Mind you, a border is always a line of tension. And when that happens, then somebody intervenes, if there is somebody there to intervene. Like in the case of the Kaveri River, it is the Interstate Water Disputes Committee, whatever its name is. In the case of, for example, the Jordan River, it was the US. In the case of the Indus Water Treaty, it was the World Bank. So there's somebody there, that both parties or three parties are willing to listen to, and somehow they listen to, and after some time then they don't agree with what has been given to each side, and then they go back to the Supreme Court, which is what is happening on the Kaveri River. That then there are now four parties to the whole thing, because Pondicherry and Kerala have also been given a small little bit of the water, and nobody is satisfied with the Kaveri Water Disputes Committee, and they all go to the Supreme Court, and well, that's where the story is. The third stage is when arbitration adjudication fails, or agreements fail altogether, and then you take the gun, and its might is right after that, as has happened in the Jordan River, for that matter. Now, these problems abound, and the only way to solve these problems as far as I see, is to say that nobody should own these. Actually, you should have only usufruct rights proportional to the use. Now, how to do it? Let's talk about it a bit later, because that is a methodological issue. Let's talk about basically, the principle of dealing with these kind of issues. Okay, so much for human to human conflict. Now let's come to human and nature conflicts, about which so little work has been done on water. First of all, water is treated as a mass. Water is not just a mass, it's actually an energy carrier as well. Okay? Now, interestingly, I was on a long time back on a Supreme Court committee on the Hussain Sagar Lake, and we came across a very interesting story. Water is not water in this country, water is land, actually. There was an old Muslim woman who said, according to this particular scheme, you're supposed to give land to a widow, and she kept on badgering the district collector, and finally he got fed up and he told his assistant, "De do isko." And the assistant gave her some land, and she looked at her parchi and said, "Oh, okay, this is the survey number." And woe be it, where was that land she got? It was in the middle of Hussain Sagar Lake. How did that happen? In this country, water is not recognized for what it is. That it is a mass as well as an energy carrier, and actually it is an entity in itself. In this country, all the way it deals with water is that, oh, it's some piece of water on a piece of land, so it's given a survey number. So the basic ecosystem service that water does is just not recognized by our law. And therefore you come across all these kind of glitches, and therefore part of the whole conflict that we have on water. So let me come to Dr. G. Agarwal, later known as Gyan Swarup Sanand, when he took sannyas in 2011. Like Abhee Dutt-Mazumder, brilliant. I've had opportunity to work with him for 8 years as an environmental engineer. He's one of the few guys that I have ever come across who had a memory like a computer. And this man was the dean in IIT Kanpur, later the first member secretary of the Central Pollution Control Board, resigned out of disgust from the Central Pollution Control Board, set up his own company, and used to take a salary of 1 rupee from his company a month. He was an ascetic, never married. All his belongings were in a chola. He died last year on the 11th of October after 111 days of fasting to save the Ganga River. Now his first set of demands, this was his 5th fast, and I went and sat with him in August last year, and sat on a fast with him, in fact, for 3 days in support. Now we had our disagreements on questions of equality, but we had a lot of agreement on the question of sustainability. So basically, what did he say? Essentially, what he said was that this water in the Ganga should be allowed to run free to the extent possible. So he did his first fast in 2008. And by 2011, after 4 fasts, when Jairam Ramesh was the Ministry of Environment, finally the government agreed that it would abandon the existing river projects on Bhagirathi. And they abandoned the Lohar Nagpala and such dams out there, because the way that they were going to treat the Bhagirathi river, it was being sent through tunnels and all kinds of things, and the whole question was the riverbed was going to be dry in many parts. So finally he won the battle. Now in 2018 he sat on a fast for the rest of the Ganga River, and what he said is that this water is not just meant for humans, it's also meant for other species. It should be allowed to run free. The water to the extent, he didn't say break all the dams, he said don't construct any more dams. And I was there when Nitin Gadkari called him and said, no, we are not agreeable to all your demands. He made 4 demands basically. The main demand was essentially that there should be what is called an environmental flow. And Dr. G. Agarwal asked for a 50% environmental flow in the river, because basically he said that this water is not just for humans, it's meant for other things as well. And that is what the government did not agree to. And they gave only 20% e-flow in certain places and 30% in other places. and no less a person than a professor in IIT Kanpur, who is the head of the what is called IIT consortium on the Ganga river, said that this flow is already there, so actually government is not giving anything new on the Ganga river. Didn't give anything new to Dr. G. Agarwal at all. Finally, on the 111th day, Dr. G. Agarwal died at the age of 86. So this is a conflict which we're going to run into increasingly, because in India, the projections, and these are government projections, are that by 2050 our water demand is going to exceed the amount of water that we have in this country. And that's going to create a lot of problems, not just in terms of water not being available. Already there are many cities. I was in Chennai just last week, and Chennai was dry, had gone dry already. And not only are there going to be problems with humans not getting water, there are going to be problems with many other species and forests and so on dying out because of this problem. Let me mention one problem that's going to happen, and particularly in South India. Again, I'll try and show you some few slides at the end, because these slides are very revealing, and we do this through what is called long-range forecasting of what is going to happen ecologically, both in India and outside India. Like I told you, the upper air wind map has a peculiar kind of a pattern. In the monsoon period, which is now, it goes exactly in the reverse direction. That is, you have the southwest monsoon, the winds come from the Arabian Ocean, they cross Kerala, they go through the Deccan Plateau, take a U-turn, and then finally go to Pakistan. So you have two very broad patterns. For 8 months, it comes from Turkey, follows the Ganga, takes a sort of a U-turn, comes into South India, and gets stopped out there. Now, as these winds move, what happens is that they pick up air pollutants, particularly acid gases like sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide, and they keep on depositing them 100 kilometers, 500 kilometers away, 1,000 kilometers away. This is called long-range transport of air pollution, which is something that Central Pollution Control Board even began to become aware of this only when we started telling them, on behalf of UNAM, that there is this problem and it's going to be a pretty severe problem in India in due course of time. And while doing this modeling, we started figuring out that actually when these acid gases go and hit soils which are acidic, those soils then are going to further acidify, and most of the soils on which our forests are on acidic soils, whether the Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats, the Himalayas, the Northeast, or even the Andamans. Our best forests are in these 5 regions. They're largely on acid soils. In fact, some of your Sundarban soils are acidic. I've tested the soils both in the Western Ghats and in some parts of the Sundarbans myself. Okay. Now, if you put acid on these acidic soils, they're going to further acidify. They're not going to have the ability to support vegetation. And as that starts happening in the Western Ghats, which provides water to 3 primary rivers in the Deccan Plateau, the Godavari, the Krishna, and the Kaveri, the whole pattern of water is going to change. That is, you have water for about 8 months in the year in the riverbeds, and you have 4 months of dry riverbeds. It's going to reverse. You'll have water for 4 months, and they won't be in the form of water, they'll be in the form of floods, basically, because there won't be a forest to catch that water and release it slowly. And what this is going to do to the Deccan Plateau, which has 20% of India's population, is it's going to intensify social conflict. As you have water stress, social conflict increases. This is what it's going to do, basically, these acid gases in the country. And these acid gases have been monitored, for example, by Mangalore University, in an area where there is no industry within about 100 kilometers, anywhere close to that area. They've monitored acid gases, and they've monitored acid rain there. So obviously, it is coming long range. And long range transport is very, very, very possible from power plants, because power plant stacks are such that they send the acid gases up to a height of a kilometer and a half, and once you get into that, what is called upper air, it moves anything like 500 kilometers a day, 300, 500, 700 kilometers a day. So we modeled some of these things and found that, for example, from power plants, you can have, in a single day, they move right up to, say, from eastern India up to Kudremukh National Park. So we are going to have a situation where acid gases from North India are actually going to disturb the soils of West Bengal, Bihar and Jharkhand, as well as the soils of South India. Because some of these soils are acidic soils, basically. Where you have alkaline soils, like in the central part of northern India, like in UP and Punjab and Haryana and so on, it's not going to do very much damage out there. Because those soils have the capacity to take in these acid gases and neutralize them. So, coming back to the Ganga, basically what Dr. Agarwal was saying is that we are overusing water and we should, let's not do it because our future is going to be affected by this whole process. So, let me generalize from this point, saying that what we are going to face is a problem which is far bigger in its dimension in due course. And that is going to happen because of climate change. Climate change is already here. It's not something that's going to happen some 50 years from now. It's not something that's going to happen in some distant land. It's happening now, here, and in West Bengal. And in fact, I'll show you slides of how a school in the Sundarbans, in fact, a photograph taken by a friend of mine, 2014, children going to school. 2017, the building of the school is bashed up by the sea. Now, this could partially be due to subsidence as well, not just sea rise. But, the projections that we have now, in fact, we've done some of this work, quite clearly indicates that the Sundarbans area particularly is going to be very prone to sea rise, not of 1 to 2 meters, which is what the prediction is that it will happen by 2100 all over the world, but it's going to be closer to 3 to 4 meters. Why? Because it's a delta region. And you have something called pollards in delta region, which means water which comes in with the tide doesn't go back. And because of this process, what happens is that the observed sea rise in the Sundarbans area is much higher than the general observed sea rise in the rest of the world. So the sea rise in the Sundarbans area is going to be closer to 3 to 4 meters by 2100, which basically means Dhaka is gone. The sea is almost on the border of India, near Meghalaya, and Calcutta is gone by 2100. It's going to be underwater. Okay. Now, what implications does that have to the subcontinent? And the subcontinent, the whole South Asian region, is one of the 2 most vulnerable regions in the world to climate change. So on the one hand, Maldives, a quarter of it is going under the sea by 2100. 5 crore Bangladeshis will be what are called climate refugees. And they're going to walk into India. They have no other place to go. They're poor farmers. I've been there. They're poorer than the farmers here in West Bengal. Now there are 2 ways of dealing with this. Either we say that, okay, you're not Indians, I show you the gun. Or the other, we say that your emissions are only 0.35% of the global emissions. You're not to be blamed for what has happened to you. Someone else is to be blamed. And we take you in on humanitarian grounds. I opt for the latter. I wouldn't opt for what we did with the Rohingyas, quite obviously. On the other side, that's a very interesting problem. What's going to happen to Pakistan? Pakistan has one river, the Indus. The Indus is dependent on glacial melt to the extent of 44% or a little over 40%. Whatever, it's about 40%. How much are Ganga and Brahmaputra dependent? 10%, 12%. That's about it. Okay? So if China puts a dam in Tibet, India is not too bothered because much of the water in the Brahmaputra really comes from precipitation. Or the Ganga, for that matter of fact. Pakistan is going to be so badly affected because of global warming and glacial melt. Because once the glaciers shrink, which is what's happening, Pakistan is in big trouble. And therefore, I say that, I often say this, that in fact, problems in Pakistan are not going to be because of Afghanistan or India so much as they're going to be, or what they perceive as problems anyway, but it's going to be because they are dependent on one single river, and that single river is dependent to the extent of 40 or 44% on glacial melt. So they're going to have a very severe water shortage problem in a very short while. And once there is a water shortage, there's going to be conflict and there are going to be refugees. And I wouldn't bet that Pakistani refugees won't try to walk into India. They probably will. So what should India do? Should they say, we are Indians, you are Pakistanis? Or should they say finally, as I would say, in the final analysis, we are all Africans. There is no color or race or caste that should differentiate us with one another. And we should take in, if they come, we should take in those refugees from wherever, if we can, that is. If we have the capacity and the, big heart, which is what we should have. At another level, what's going to happen in Nepal? Now, below every glacier, there is something called a glacial lake. I just want to know how much time do I have? Okay.
15 minutes.
Oh, fine. Yeah. So below every glacier, there is something called a glacial lake. That is, there's water which is retained by what is called a moraine dam. Now, as the glaciers melt, and they are melting, I have satellite pictures of, for example, the Gangotri, and to how much it has melted, the glacier, how much it has receded, and so on. The glacial lake starts expanding, and then suddenly the natural dam, the moraine dam bursts, and you have something called a Prof, which means a glacial lake outburst flood. And that flood just washes away entire villages, farms, cattle, people, everything, for 300 kilometers, 400 kilometers downstream of the thing. Drop frequencies have increased in Bhutan, in India, in the Himalayas of India, Bhutan, Nepal. So Nepal is going to be badly affected by droughts, as, for example, would be Bhutan or India, or for that matter of fact, that part of the Himalayas that that Pakistan occupies. So this is going to become a problem for these countries. Maldives, forget about the Maldives. I've been there half a dozen times to train them in air quality monitoring. They were least interested in understanding air quality monitoring. Least interested. They were like Greta Thunberg. What did Greta say finally? She went on strike, saying, what's the point in going to school when the world is going to end? So the Maldives were saying the same thing. We're going to drown by 2100, there are no islands left. 1300 beautiful islands. Absolutely. It's a breathtakingly beautiful place. The fish there, the seabed is something out of the world. It's gone by 2100. Maldives emissions are probably 0.01 or even less than that of the total global emissions. And I wrote this in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, that basically if we want both equality as well as sustainability, then the US and Canada will have to reduce their energy consumption by 90% and Europe by 75%. So some wag wrote saying, oh, you want to make us into a third world country? Just try it. So I gave the example of the Maldives. I said, listen, Maldives is going to drown due to no fault of theirs, not because of their emissions. They're going to drown because of your emissions, what you have done for the last 250 years. Because 78% of all the historic emissions are basically from Northern America and Europe, Australia and Japan included. Okay, let's forget New Zealand, it's too small a country, right? So I said, but who cares in the west about the Maldives? I said, forget about the Maldives. Who cares in Banjara Hills in Hyderabad, where the rich people stay? Or who cares in Malabar Hills, where the rich people of Bombay stay? They don't. Finally, the poor have to look after themselves. They have to learn, and the vulnerable have to learn to look after themselves. And they will learn this. They'll be pushed into learning. There are only two choices they have. Either they learn or they perish. There's no other choice in this whole thing. So, okay, so let me come to some of the climate change issues. I went to Kerala last year, just after the heavy rains that there were, and to Idukki district along with one of my friends there, and 500 people died. Now, what did we find? We found that most of the people died in landslides. It happens very suddenly. Anything that is sudden is always problematic because you have no forewarning. Just like you have had in, for example, the Bhopal gas leak. Okay, it's always a sudden release of energy or a sudden release of matter. You have no warning, so you're caught like a dead duck out there. So they sat there and they died, both in Bhopal as well as in Idukki district. When we started looking at it closely, we found that the root length of I'm not a botanist, I'm an engineer, basically. But through long experience, I've learned to observe things. So, we found that the root depth of plantations was much shallower than that of forests. Over the last 100 years, we've removed the forest in that region, put plantations, and in the process, what did we do? We passed a death sentence on our own people. Of course, the government added to the whole thing, government of Kerala, to the whole thing. Basically, there are two sets of government departments that have management over the dams. You have the upstream dams, which the electricity department owns. You have the downstream dams right near the coast, which is owned by the irrigation department. So suddenly when there was a lot of rain, the electricity department opens the sluice gates, doesn't inform the irrigation department. All that water comes down very suddenly, stacks up in the Chalmudi river at the irrigation dam because the sluice gates are closed, goes up 12 feet high. I have pictures of watermarks in houses and things of that sort. So we have this huge problem of extreme weather events of this sort. 2005 Bombay, more than 1,000 people died. 2013 was Chennai. 2013 was Kedarnath, more than 5,000 people died. 2015 was Chennai. 2018 is Kerala. And very recently I was in Bombay, stuck because I had no transport. Just 3 weeks back. In 4 days, I was moving from Pune to Surat and I got stuck in Bombay. No trains, no buses, no nothing, so to speak. In 4 days, Bombay got as much rain as what Delhi gets in a whole year. And it was 1/3 Bombay's precipitation for a whole year. Now, is this global warming? Any scientist would can't say we don't have enough statistics on it, but can say that it looks like it is going in that direction. And that's what I would say also. Looks like it's going in that direction. So what is it going to do to water? It's going to play havoc with water all over the world, in fact. And it's going to create more conflict, both between people as well as between people and other species. This is what climate change is going to do. And it's going to do it on a scale which is totally unprecedented. We can't even imagine the scale at which these things are going to happen. Let me give you 2 or 3 very simple kind of examples. Now, there is something called a feed-forward mechanism. Now, as the Greenland ice sheet is 1.7 million square kilometers in area, it's a massive ice sheet, 2 kilometers thick, fresh water. As it starts melting, if it melts completely, the sea rise will be 7 meters. As it starts melting, it's going to play havoc with something called a thermohaline circulation. Now, the thermohaline circulation is a heat exchange device. It's a device which distributes the heat from the equator to the poles. And this whole thermohaline circulation connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Indian Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. This is going to get disturbed. And once this gets disturbed, the entire climatic system in the world, all parts of the world, are going to be disturbed. And so what is going to happen is, like, some of our scientists say, the very same district in India is going to have floods and drought in the same year. Just imagine what that's going to do in terms of mass migration of people, in terms of then conflict between one set of people and another set of people. It's just going to exacerbate the whole thing, actually. The second problem that we're going to face, second major feed-forward mechanism, is going to be the melting of permafrost in Siberia and Alaska. Because if that happens, billions of tons of methane, which has a global warming potential, which is 25 times more than that of carbon dioxide, are going to be released, and that itself is going to play havoc with global warming. The warming will just go into auto fast ride, so to speak. And the third thing is the Arctic ice, as it melts, it will decrease the reflectivity from 90%, which is what ice does, to 6%, which is what oceans do. That means the Earth is just going to absorb more heat, more incoming solar radiation. Now, who created all this problem? We, as a whole, and the rich. There are 2 ideologies that we followed. One is anthropocentrism, which basically means I am superior to other species. I can take as much energy as I want and do whatever I want. What have we done in the last 8,000 years? We've cut half our forest, 40 million square kilometers of forest. When we did an energy calculation on this, we found that for each one of those years, we have expended energy equal to 20,000 Hiroshima bombs, atomic bombs. We've done nothing short of war on nature. And unless we get rid of this mentality of ours that we are superior to other species, we cannot get out of the growth paradigm. We just can't. Okay? The second is class society. Very simple. If I invest 1 joule of energy, I can get 30 joules back in coal. If I take that means 29 is profit. And how do I do it? I put a fence around the coal mine and say it's mine. The centrality of the question is who made that coal and how much energy did it cost to make the coal. There's very little work done on this, and when we tried doing work, the closest estimate we were able to come to, and I still say estimate because our findings have to be scientifically good to be able to put it out in a paper. We found that our initial estimate is that it takes 45,000 joules that nature puts in to make each joule of coal. So whom should that coal belong to? Me or nature? So the question arises, where does ownership right come from? And we tried looking up, property law, tried looking up philosophy, and found that they don't answer the question. Just like if a physicist asks a question, what is matter or what is energy? There is no answer to this, not in physics. Likewise, who made the coal? And therefore, where does an ownership right come from? There is no answer. The answer is nature. And therefore, where does an ownership right come from? So, how does law, property law is one of the big subjects you have in the 3-year, in the second year, property law is taught to law students. There are a whole set of rules, do this, don't do this, do that, don't do that, anything. Where does it come from? What is its origin? I don't know. If somebody can tell me, I'd be very happy to know these things. So, I for one have decided that we have to move towards a society that works on usufruct rights. And the minute you say we work on usufruct rights and not on ownership rights, then the whole theory of value, whether it be from Adam Smith or Ricardo, from where Marx took off, starts fading. So we have to then start redefining what is value. Okay, so we had a Paris Agreement. Paris Agreement said nice things, we should remain under 2 degrees or preferably under 1.5. Right now, the projections are that we are going to be between 3 and 4 degrees by 2100. In fact, there's an MIT study which says probably even 5 degrees. So we are in, use rough terms, big shit trouble. And unless we start doing things, as IPCC says, within the next 12 years, if we can't solve this problem, there are only 2 options we have. Either we can solve it, or we start moving towards collapse. That is what it's all about. We have 2 other problems along with this whole thing. Now, just to finish this analysis a little bit, it's not just ownership rights, but the way that surplus energy, when I said 29 joules is surplus energy, there are 2 other ways of doing this whole thing. One is by conquest, which is what the British did in India. That's easy to understand, so I won't elaborate. The second is through what we call unequal exchange of energy. In an unequal exchange of energy, which is not understood very well, basically what happens is there is a thermodynamic equation. In any thermodynamic equation, the energy input has to be equal to the energy output. In any mathematical equation, this is how it works. Unfortunately, in an economic equation, it just doesn't work that way. Because the air I breathe, I don't pay for. Okay, the solar energy that a farmer uses is not paid for. And therefore, the input energy in an economic equation is not equal to the output energy. And that's how you have the whole concept of surplus energy coming into place, in fact. So as long as you do not have the economic equation not coincidental with the thermodynamic equation, you will have a society which will continue to remain unsustainable. And this is the problem with agriculture and industry. We did an analysis of how much energy industry gives agriculture and vice versa, and we found that what agriculture gives industry is 40% more than what industry